So this was a ruling from a federal appeals court in Washington called the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. It handles cases like this.
Is this an important court in the stacking of courts?
Yes, it handles a little more wonky political stuff.
Okay.
But suffice it to say that this is a temporary stay, as you noted. It's called an administrative stay, not to get too wonky, but that just means...
No, get wonky, because we want to understand this.
Okay, so that just means that they looked at Trump's request for a stay pending appeal, and that request also said, hey, while you're considering this stay pending appeal, why don't you go ahead and issue a very brief administrative stay that just immediately puts this on hold while you consider a longer lasting stay. So right at this moment, the trade court that issued this sweeping, kind of shocking decision last night, blocking these tariffs, finding them illegal, that is currently paused while the court considers whether to issue a longer lasting stay pending appeal.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Trump had said, the administration had said that they were prepared to go to the Supreme Court directly if they didn't get some sort of action like this, because it is.
Is this like, I'm going to go to mom and ask, or I'm going to go to dad and
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask, Erik. Does it mean that the president, will not go to the Supreme Court tomorrow, as they said they would?
It looks like it's more likely that he won't, just because he does now have this stay, but that doesn't mean that he won't go soon. If he doesn't get the stay pending appeal that he wants, you could expect Trump to go to the Supreme Court on that. Maybe that just means it doesn't happen tomorrow.
But don't they need an official ruling so they can move beyond this and decide which avenue they want to go when it comes to implementing these tariffs?
Right. So that could involve a whole case where there would be arguments in courts, big briefing by both sides, and where the appeals court that just issued this decision, where they would put down a ruling on the merits to say whether or not the trade court's decision was correct or not. And that's going to take some time for a case like that to carry on. But right now we know that the administration was given a 10-day window, a deadline to start implementing the unwinding of the tariffs. So it's a little more urgency here for both sides.
So help me understand. I never quite sometimes understand the legal process, or maybe it's set up to be this way. Rulings can happen and you could say, well, wait a minute, maybe that ruling wasn't right. So if the federal appeals court blocked President Trump's global tariffs, they ruled that. Like, how many times do we get, I guess, the process that the administration can appeal it once, right? And then that court's going to come with another decision, and then is that the final decision? Or can the folks that originally got the decision to block his global tariffs can then come back again?
Well, I mean, we see that with a lot of cases involving.
I don't have a law degree, as you can tell. So help me understand.
So what you can have is multiple stages of appeals, because right now this is a fight over a stay pending appeal. But a lot of times you'll see in cases where there have been injunctions issued against Trump's executive orders or things like that.
Right.
And then you have appeals over those injunctions. So, I mean, how often do we see a case that's appealed after a final trial? Those can take a long time. So these appeals in the middle of the cases still are quite significant and can end up being permanent for all intents and purposes.
Is this stay, or the appeals court that allows the president's tariffs to stay in effect for now, is this the result of an action that the Trump administration took earlier in the day or late yesterday on their behalf?
Yeah, the Trump administration, the Justice Department, filed a request for this longer lasting stay and an administrative stay, saying that it was urgent, that they needed this trade court's order to be put on hold, or the government and the Trump administration would face irreparable harm to his trade negotiations, to national security, you name it. They put a pretty urgent sounding document in there. And so that's what this decision is. It's a very brief decision. It's like one paragraph. It doesn't give a big explanation. It just puts the status quo in for now.
But the administration is also asking the U.S. Court of International Trade, that's the court that came down with the decision late yesterday, to put its own order on hold while the case is on appeal. How does that work?
So basically, the Trump administration is asking two different courts for the same thing, just to see which will give them what they want. And so a judge, in this case, a panel of judges in the Court of International Trade, could grant a stay of their own decision. That's something they could grant. they're going to consider it. And the plaintiffs in that case are going to give their view on that tomorrow by noon. They have a deadline. But meanwhile, now we've gotten this stay action from the Federal Circuit. So the strategy sort of paid off.
So it explains why maybe markets aren't off and running, right? Because we just don't know what the outcome of this will be. It just feels like this came out of nowhere. I think we just assumed, okay, we're now at the stage of the Trump administration negotiating with countries on what tariffs will be. And of course, the clock is ticking down to the end of that 90-day pause. But this feels like it came out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, we did write about when the cases were filed, and we covered the
Shame
hearings.
on us.
No, we did cover the hearings, but I think you're right. I don't think that people necessarily expected it to be so sweeping. I, for one, didn't actually expect it because the court yesterday could have also just issued an injunction against the tariffs while the case proceeded. That also would have been a big setback for Trump. But instead, they went for the full summary judgment, gave the plaintiffs full victory without a trial. So they really did put the hammer down. But these state attorneys general, I was just interviewing the AG of Oregon earlier today, had a call with him because his state led the case.
Yeah.
And he said that he's confident that the states are going to prevail at the Supreme Court regardless of what happens. I spoke with him before the stay was issued, but he's confident.
Well, what's his argument exactly?
His argument is that the Supreme Court doesn't want to give this kind of power to a sitting president. And he gave me a really interesting scenario. He said, what if the next president is a Democrat and declares that there's a national emergency with gun violence and uses that to put massive tariffs on guns and sort of makes it impossible for anyone to purchase a firearm? Now, the government is arguing that a president's use of this emergency power cannot be reviewed by the courts, and that in theory, only Congress would be able to overrule them by actually, legislating against such a move, which would be potentially difficult. So I think that the AG is like, you don't want to give this power to a president because then they'll just be able to declare an emergency over anything and hit anyone they want with any tariffs they want.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that this is about, again, we're in an era where I think we're defining or perhaps redefining presidential power. And we've seen it not only just on the Republican side or with President Trump, but we've seen increasingly presidents, including President Obama, using executive orders, right? And kind of bypassing congressional action. So it does feel like it's a bigger case potentially about kind of where is the line when it comes to presidential power.
And one that could hit Americans in their pocketbooks, of course, for pretty sweeping.
All right, so what's the next date? Okay, so this is going on. So I'm curious, what's next? What clock is ticking on what next legal action?
So in the trade
and which court?
Right. So in the trade court that issued this sweeping decision yesterday, the state AGs and the small businesses that sued have until tomorrow at noon to file their argument for why there should be no stay pending appeal. And meanwhile, in the actual appeals court for the Federal Circuit, this order that just came down gave the plaintiffs a June 9th deadline to respond to the request for a longer lasting stay pending appeal. So we're still sort of on these two tracks.
Given the sources that you're talking to on the side of the Democratic AGs and the states who are suing over this, or who are, I guess it's fair to say suing? Is that right?
They filed a federal lawsuit.
What's their next step after this?
Well, I think that it really is all about this brief that they have to file tomorrow with the trade court, and also now this other one with the Federal Circuit, to argue why this decision, this sweeping unanimous decision by this conservative-leaning court should be locked in place while this case proceeds. So it's really going to come down to what kind of arguments they make, perhaps like the ones I was just laying out from the Oregon Attorney General. They need to make the case that who's going to be harmed irreparably, to use another legal term. Trump says he's going to be harmed irreparably, and the states say they will, because it comes down to money. Americans are going to be starting to pay more, sometimes already paying more.
Right.
And the states say that their own budgets are in turmoil because of the massive amounts of purchasing that they have to do. They have too much uncertainty around their budgets, how much things are going to cost, basic things for infrastructure and things like that.